Hey everybody, this is Cody922 here. Welcome to Cody Talks Fandom, episode number 32. I'm sure that somewhere out there, probably more of you than the ones that are excited for this, are wondering what happened to the Funblade interview. Well, what wound up happening there was that I happened to, Well, what happened with the Funblade interview was that sometimes technical problems do occur, and unfortunately there was a technical problem that I was alerted to, but I did not check up on as thoroughly as I should have, and unfortunately the interview is lost. It's completely unusable. I literally cannot use the interview, but which sucks. I wish I could. But things happen, so we're moving on now to the Weiss Schnee episode. I will say this is not Funblade's, that will not be Funblade's only potential appearance on the show. I actually have an episode scheduled in the future with an idea to use Funblade in it. So look forward to that because it's going to be a fun episode. But for right now, we're back to Cody Talks Fandom, and this episode is going to continue along the canon versus Fanon of things, and what I'm actually just now going to call it is the Fanon interpretation episodes. That's all I'm going to call it. And this is going to be for the lovely heiress, Weiss Schnee. So Weiss is a character who is interesting in canon. You can definitely argue, and I think that it is between either her or Blake, that Weiss has gotten the most screen time out of anybody in RWBY so far. And you'd be hard-pressed to argue against that, honestly, because she, as I said, with the exception of Blake, and I actually don't think Jean, I think screen time-wise he's gotten less than Weiss, but with the sole exception of Blake, I don't think that you can really argue that anybody had more than Weiss. And with it comes a lot of character development. We really started off with kind of this more one-track, I'm a racist human being because of I'm a racist human being person, and I'm also spoiled and a brat. And from there, we have gotten kind of a glimpse into her family, a glimpse into a lot of things that shape up this character to be more than just I'm a spoiled brat. So that's the canon version of Weiss, which is obviously only has slight relevance to the show. What about the Fanon version of this Weiss? Well, the Fanon version of this Weiss is interesting to me. And why is she interesting to me? Because I'd argue that Weiss in this instance has the most different ways of being used within Fanon interpretation that I have personally seen out of definitely any character in the Big Four. Obviously, there's some characters whom we don't know a whole lot personality-wise to, and those are being experimented on widely, such as, let's throw a name out there, Scarlet. Let's say Scarlet. You know, you can obviously you can quite literally do anything with Scarlet because we don't have any kind of canon thing there to contradict that. But for characters that will be appearing on this thing, Weiss has the most different interpretations to her within the Fanon. There is the first one, which is very, very common, which is the one that is most akin to what we have in canon. I am an heiress, I'm a spoiled brat, but I'm learning to love my team, I'm learning to accept my team, I'm learning to accept the fondness, and I'm trying to make things right. You have, along with that, you also have the Weiss that is kind of like, you have the Weiss that is literally just a spoiled brat. That is literally, there is nothing else to her character. You also have the Weiss that understands that everything is wrong that I've seen. That understands what is wrong with the way that things are being done. And then you have the Weiss that, or for the first one I forgot to mention, but it's like, that's the one that's like, I'm a victim. But for the last one, the Weiss that truly is a victim, that really is not, has formed prejudices based around what is literally happened to her, what is, how badly she's been hurt, not just by the fondness, but also by the family around her. So, there's a lot that is done with this character, and I think that's a good thing. I think that it's very, very believable for Weiss to have all this stuff happen around her, just because she's very open-ended. We've gotten a lot from the show about her. We have a very, very clear idea as far as what the show wants to happen to her, but we are also the fandom. So what happens to her in the show and what happens to her here, two different sets of rule books. And so far, we've really taken advantage of that, and which I say is awesome. So, as I said, the first one is the one that's most akin to the canon, but in this instance, this is a character that is actually fairly well set within the canon. It's not like RWBY, where RWBY not as well set so far. We have yet to really truly get everything out of RWBY. Excuse me. So we have a lot of we've got a long way to go with this character. With White, or sorry, we have some ways to go, but the canon version of her is fairly obvious so far. It's fairly simple, straightforward. I'm a victim. That is the one thing that summarizes it perfectly. Is Weiss is literally just, these horrible things happen to my family around them, so in turn I hate an entire race. Oh, but Blake isn't that bad. Shout out to Monochrome. So this race, I'm learning to accept Blake and maybe eventually the entirety of the Faunus. I like that, Weiss, actually. I'm personally a big fan. I think that Weiss fits what they needed fairly well for this character, and has continued to grow. I think that events surrounding her within the show have not been handled great, and unfortunately, I also think that reflects in the Fanon. I think that for Weiss, especially when it comes to the matter of dealing with people, yes, she's going to be bad at it. But dealing with people who annoy her, or who she doesn't like, that is another story. I think that Weiss would be very swift, very decisive with those people. Like in canon, the example that comes to mind is Jean. Jean repeatedly asking her out. In canon, she let it happen, more or less. Like, she said no, but, it still happened and whatnot, and Weiss never 100% put her foot down and put her sword against his throat or something like that. That's something more that I feel as though would be akin to Weiss. Would be akin to Weiss's character of, don't fucking touch me. Because I'm perfect and you're not. Something like that. Like, that's kind of how I picture Weiss being. And that's not really what we've gotten out of canon. And it's also not what we've gotten out of Fanon. There is, apart from in future versions of Weiss, such as there's going to be a lot of references to this, so prepare as this segment continues. The future AU, Kuma from Taiwan's AU, which is henceforth. Those are the two examples. Kuma's especially. That's the number one thing that's in my mind. That's like the forefront for this. Is Weiss is literally what is her name from Kill Bill? The Japanese American person who takes over the big. Anyway, it's been a little bit since I've seen the whole movie, but she is kind of like how I picture it. Is if anybody in this, in quoting that, if anybody has a problem with my heritage, I will take your head now. Kind of an attitude. And that's sort of like Weiss, where if you have a problem with the way I'm running things, I don't need you here anymore. You can just leave. Just get out, because you won't be able to find a better place than here, and you won't be able to do a better job than me. That's the kind of Weiss that I like. Insecure, yes, you can argue that Weiss has her insecurities. But when people piss her off, we don't right now, anyways, within the canon and within the Fanon, we don't get a whole lot of, I'm angry. I'm going to take names. I'm going to not stand for this. That doesn't happen a lot right now in either form. And I think it should. I think that this is a very underutilized option with Weiss. That's kind of a personal opinion, but in the AUs where time kind of goes on, that always happens to Weiss. Is it her gaining confidence? Sure, you can argue that. Weiss is gaining confidence, so therefore these things happen now. But I think that the other problem is that people maybe focus a little bit too much on the portion of Weiss that is, I'm insecure and I don't know how to handle things and this, and this. I think that maybe that part gets a little bit too much focus. And I don't think it should. I think that is a very, very big and a very crucial portion to Weiss. Obviously, it is right now where this character stands in the show. She is it is for her. That is the case, but there needs to be more, I think, for the Fanon. And I'm talking strictly Fanon here. You have the different iterations of it, and so I'm going to go to the ones that I talked about. You have the accepting Weiss. That Weiss is a little bit harder for me personally to stomach. It's not used very much. Harder for me to talk about that one because it's really not used a ton. It's kind of like it's ebb and flow. It comes and it goes. But Weiss, but then the other two versions of Weiss, the biggest one that I'm going to play upon is the one that is the one that actually is a victim. That one also is, I would like to see more of that on the personal note. But yeah, I understand why. It's harder to put Weiss in the victim role than it is to put her in the oppressor role. Or the role that, that she really is in the show. It's harder to put her in that role. But I personally like the role. One story that does utilize this is a story called Broken Wings by Cody 922. But, it puts Weiss in a position where she's the victim. And I'd love to see more of that. I think that it is something that would make sense. Why is Weiss like this? Oh, well, she actually is the victim. She's not just, the spoiled brat. And it would add a nice little twist to things. So if you make a story and Weiss is the victim, send it to me. I'm kidding. Don't actually send it to me. But, it is definitely interesting. There's a lot that you can do with this. But even with that character, that one makes more sense for it to be timid. That's the one that is. But Weiss is not a timid. But Weiss is not necessarily... she is an insecure character. Yes. She's not a timid character, though. I think that's where the real difference comes in my mind. Weiss is not timid. She is, this is what I want. I'm going to get what I want. And I think that is the portion of Weiss that is underutilized. Now, of course, you might think differently. And you might think that for Weiss, she's kind of used the way that she should be. And I really don't disagree necessarily with that. I think that Weiss is used very, very well a lot of times. But I think that the one real Fanon piece that I want and I need and I feel as though there should be more of is the Weiss that is literally just, this is what I want. I'm going to get what I want. Do you have a problem with this? Okay, I don't need you. That's me. So let's talk about the other portion of things for the Fanon versus canon. Shipping. Weiss is interesting because she is probably the only character that I can think of anyways, who might say that the ships that she is shipped with the absolute most are all within her team. I see lots of monochrome right now. A good amount of White Rose. Most of that is old, yes, but it exists. White Rose counts. We've not forgotten you yet. Rest in peace, White Rose. There is, and Freezer Burn. And Freezer Burn really is very far down. It's monochrome is way up at the top, and then way below that is White Rose. Way below that is Freezer Burn. The list drops rapidly. And that's due to, and that's really kind of due to Freezer Burn occupies that spot. Why does Freezer Burn occupy that spot? Well, Freezer Burn occupies that spot because nobody else is really there. The other ship that I'd say beyond that would be White Knight, which is Weiss and John. There's Pyrrha and Weiss, but I see that strictly due to select people whom I follow on Tumblr. And then it really, Arctic Ocean. Surprising lack of that due to their prom date with each other. I can kind of understand why, because it's, because of the prom arc, how a lot of us feel about that, how I personally feel about that. But, it still is an event that happened within canon, which, regardless of whether or not that made it canon for the entirety of the show, now it is canon for at least one moment in the show. So we will see about Weiss's ships moving forward, but I think Freezer Burn is above everything else, and Freezer Burn is not that popular. Weiss is just, what she gets shipped with. Right now, it's 99% monochrome, or right now I'd say it's not 99. I would say over 50%. Let's say 65% monochrome, and then after that is White Rose, which I'd say 20%, 20 to 30%. Somewhere around there, and then Freezer Burn is like 5%, and then after that is everything else. There's really not that much variety with this character in terms of what she gets shipped with. I kind of wonder why that is, but because you look at Weiss's personality, and there's a lot of characters that could break her open. Pyrrha is actually one of them. Nora, there's another one. Penny, there's more potential there with Penny. Granted, in very, very similar mannerisms as with RWBY, as would White Rose would work. I don't know, Frozen Robot, whatever that's called. that would stick your tongue to the pole and get stuck in it, whatever that's called. It'd work with a similar dynamic as White Rose. But Weiss, as far as a character that could be shipped, you need a character that can melt her. Puns. I hate myself. But you need a character that can really kind of break through with her. You need somebody that has the personality to do it, whether or not it's through the innocence of RWBY, the bluntness of Yang, the opposition that you can get with Blake, the just pure energy that you would get out of Weiss and Nora. Weiss and Nora, that would literally be, I'm Nora, I'm hyper, do things with me. And, that would be the way that Nora would melt, which is, in a more toned down way, that is kind of White Rose, although White Rose to me has always been more along the lines of I want to help RWBY to a certain extent. And I really, and it's kind of like I don't really like her at first. And the other thing with Weiss, she never likes the person that she's with at first. She typically spends the first portion of it hating the person that she likes. But eventually Weiss comes around, and you have a lot of things. As far as people who really, really use this character well, in my personal opinion, Hanasaku Shijin still has my favorite Weiss to read on a personal note. I really, really love the way that hers reads. I personally really enjoy I've been told Machine Keys does a great job with Weiss. I have not personally read anything by Machine Keys, so secondhand word there, but it is from people whom I trust, like Ivory and Chrissy. There's two other people that use Weiss fairly well. Dash, if the character is Blake or Weiss, I think that Dash definitely deserves mention in there. Kuma is another one, Kuma from Taiwan, but I don't really think that's fair because every single character for Kuma is beautiful. And I really, really love, personally, I think my favorite AU Weiss is the Kuma from Taiwan's future, Henceforward AU. Henceforward is gorgeous. It is such a gorgeous AU, and it's such amazing characterizations for all of them. And it is kind of like the one that uses the Weiss in the way that's like, you don't like me, I take your head. You don't like the way I'm doing things? Fine. Don't come after my friends. Don't come after me, or I will come after you, and you will not enjoy this. So that covers the Weiss Schnee, I believe. The next episode is going to be an interview. The interview announcement may or may not be out by the time that this comes out. If it's not out, I'm going to refrain from it. If it is out, right now, there should be text on the screen telling you who the interviewee is, and leave your questions in the comments below. Up next for the Fanon versus Canon is the Kit Kat, Blake Belladonna. So we'll be discussing her next, And beyond that, however, I'll see all of you the next time. Bye.